The sun blazed over the perfect green lawns of Westwood Academy, a brilliant stage for a day of triumph. Laughter bounced through the air, cameras flashed like tiny stars, and proud families wrapped their graduating sons and daughters in tight hugs. Gowns and caps dotted the landscape in a sea of black. But amidst the vibrant celebration, one figure sat completely still, a small island of silence in an ocean of noise. Her black graduation robe fell over the wheels of her chair, a stark reminder of the world that separated her from the dancing and cheering crowds. She was the only daughter of one of the city's most powerful CEOs, a name that opened every door but the one to her own father's heart. In this moment, however, she wasn't a name or a title. She was just a young woman who felt utterly invisible, achingly isolated, and so profoundly alone it felt like a physical weight on her chest. Her fingers clutched the hard-earned diploma, the paper a testament to years of silent struggle, but her gaze remained fixed on the ground, unwilling to meet the pitying or curious glances of others. She had walked now, rolled across that stage. She had heard the polite, distant applause. But her heart, the part of her that yearned for a connection, felt like it had been left behind somewhere along the way. All around her, the tapestry of joy was woven with threads she couldn't touch. Friends shrieked with laughter as their parents lifted them off the ground. Classmates gathered in tight circles, their arms slung round each other as they posed for one last picture. Hugs were everywhere, a currency of affection she couldn't seem to earn. No one came to sit beside her. No one filled the empty chairs on either side of her. She had fought battles that no young woman should ever have to face. An accident, a split second of screeching tires and shattering glass, had stolen her ability to walk. The whispers that followed her down the school hallways, sharp and cruel, had tried to steal her dignity. The looks of pity, meant to be kind, had pierced her pride like 1,000 tiny needles. And through it all, there was the constant, echoing absence of a father who was more married to his boardrooms and stock prices than he was to the quiet suffering of his only child. Graduation was supposed to be the day all that pain was finally supposed to mean something, to transform into a shining victory. But as she sat there, watching the world celebrate without her, she learned a bitter truth. Triumph means nothing when there is no one to share it with. Her heart sank with each passing minute. The diploma on her lap felt less like an achievement and more like a heavy stone. Its golden seal shimmered under the afternoon sun, marking her with its brilliance. She remembered her father's promise that morning. A rushed "I'll be there," I promise spoken into a phone already buzzing with another call. He had broken it, of course. He had chosen his empire over his daughter, once again reinforcing the painful message that she was not enough. She just wanted someone, anyone, to see her. Not the wheelchair, not the tragic story, not the CEO's daughter, just her. The young woman who had survived, who had endured, who had fought with every ounce of her being to be sitting right there on that field. It was in that moment of complete despair that something shifted, a quiet and almost magical intervention from the universe itself. Across the sprawling lawn, past the rows of white chairs and happy families, a man stood holding the tiny hand of a little girl. He was dressed simply, in a clean shirt and dark pants, blending in with the crowd. His attention wasn't on the main stage or the celebrated graduates. His eyes, full of a quiet depth, were fixed on the solitary young woman in the wheelchair, watching as she seemed to fold into herself, trying to disappear. At his side, his daughter, no older than 6, tugged on his sleeve. In her other hand, she clutched a piece of paper, a child's masterpiece of a rainbow drawn with waxy crayons. The pure and filtered eyes of a child often see what the rest of the world chooses to ignore. The little girl had seen the sad graduate sitting all alone. "Daddy," she whispered, "why is she by herself? Why does she look sad on a happy day?" The single dad paused, his gaze lingering on the young woman. He hadn't come here looking to be a hero. He was only at the graduation to support his niece, who was somewhere lost in the sea of black gowns. But something in the way the graduate sat, a posture that screamed both strength and heartbreak, resonated deep within him. He, too, understood the sting of being alone. Life had dealt him a harsh hand years ago, taking his wife and leaving him to raise their little girl on his own. He knew the heavy silence of an empty house and the burden of carrying grief when the world expected you to be strong. Seeing that same shadow of loneliness hanging over someone else, he knew he couldn't just turn his back and walk away. And so, he began to walk. With his daughter's small, trusting hand in his, he navigated through the crowds, his steps sure and purposeful, moving toward the wheelchair where the CEO's daughter sat drowning in her sorrow. She didn't notice him at first. Her head was still bowed, her mind trapped in a painful loop of disappointment and loneliness. But then, the soft sound of footsteps broke through her haze, stopping right beside her. She slowly lifted her head, her eyes widening in surprise. A little girl was standing before her, offering a bright, hopeful smile and holding out the colorful drawing of a rainbow. Behind the child stood her father, who gave her a gentle nod. It wasn't a nod of pity. It was a nod of understanding, of shared humanity. The world seemed to go quiet. The boisterous sounds of the celebration faded into a dull hum in the background. In that stretched silence, for the first time all day, she felt seen. Truly and completely seen. The little girl placed the drawing in her hands. "This is for you," the child whispered, her voice sweet and clear. "My mommy said rainbows always come after the storm." The father then knelt down slightly, bringing himself closer to her level, his eyes meeting hers. He didn't say a word, but his presence spoke volumes. It told her she was not invisible. He wasn't looking at a girl in a wheelchair, or the daughter of a famous man. He was simply looking at a person who mattered. What happened next wasn't a grand, dramatic gesture. It was something far more powerful. It was simple. The man and his little girl sat down in the empty chairs beside her, feeling the vast, lonely space that had been suffocating her just moments before. They talked quietly about small things. They shared gentle smiles. They let the simple warmth of human connection begin to mend the deep cracks in her heart. For the first time, she wasn't an outsider looking in at the celebration. She was a part of it. Not because of her family name or her academic achievements, but because the strangers chose to share a moment with her. As the final names were called from the stage, she found herself smiling. It wasn't the practiced, hollow smile she saved for her cameras and polite company. It was a real, genuine smile that reached her eyes, born from the sudden, beautiful realization that real connection often arrives when you least expect it, from the most unlikely of people. In that one small act, she understood she didn't need her father's approval to be proud of what she had overcome. She didn't need the world's applause to feel worthy. All she had ever needed was a reminder that even when life shatters you into a million pieces, there are people who will sit with you in the wreckage and help you feel whole again. Her father had missed her graduation, but she had gained something far more precious. She had gained a reminder that family isn't always defined by blood, but by love, by presence, and by those who show up when you need them most. The single dad and his daughter were more than strangers. They were a living symbol of hope. They were proof that in a world that so often rushes past the broken, there are still hearts that are willing to stop, to see and to care. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, she held the crayon rainbow to her chest, her diploma resting on her lap, and a new, quiet strength blooming in her soul. She may have arrived at her graduation alone, but she would leave knowing with absolute certainty that she would never truly be alone again.